What's up, Degens? Welcome back. Happy Friday. Another edition of the Quick Breaks NBA DFS podcast, brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy Degens. As always, Sean Mitchell here at SMitchell17 on the Twitter machine. Nice little 10-game slate tonight. Nice way to kick off the weekend. Usually we do get a good slate on Friday. It's a really rare slate where we only have like 3 totals because every single game is missing a piece. Questionable person, injured person. It's really kind of hard to predict a lot of these games, but nonetheless, we know what the paces are. We know how fast these teams run. We can kind of generalize how they will, or more so how the game flow will be. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. We'll talk about the games, of course, first, and then we'll hop into the positionals. First game on the slate, of course, is going to be one that everybody is going to love, and for good reason. It's going to be the Hawks going into Washington to take on the Wizards. You have the Washington Wizards coming in here as a 1.5-point home favorite. We don't have a total. Waiting on the Brad Beal news, obviously. Atlanta coming in as the fastest team over their last 10 games in terms of pace. Washington, 13th. So we know this is going to be a really good, fast-paced game. Both of these teams are pretty bad defensively, so obviously it's a game that's going to have a lot of high stackability. It'll be pretty popular, but it's a game that you're going to want to get some pieces of. New Orleans Pelicans going into New York to take on the Knicks. The Pelicans are a 5.5-point road favorite here. Pelicans coming in as the 10th fastest over their last 10. The Knicks, 8th. I know the last pod we did, they were 2nd, which is really weird and pretty abnormal for the Knicks to be in the top 10 in pace, but here we are. Waiting on that Brandon Ingram news. He's questionable, has a sprained pinky. I'm pretty sure he'll play. Drew Holiday has already been ruled out again, so far as I know. I'm not really sure why this game doesn't have a total because I think Brandon Ingram will play. Nonetheless, we'll watch out for that status, and that's a pretty decent game. I think this one can have some pretty nice pieces as well. Going to our next one where we have the Miami Heat traveling into Brooklyn to take on the Nets. The Heat coming in as a 2.5-point road favorite, 217 on the total. Miami 28th in terms of pace over their last 10 games. Brooklyn 6th, so you have a nice little pace-up spot here for the Heat. The Pacers going into Chicago to take on the Bulls. Indiana minus 4.5 on the road. No total. Indiana 27th over their last 10 in terms of pace. Chicago 19th. Obviously, we're going to be waiting on the Brogdon news. The Nate McMillan is hopeful that he will play. Domantas Sabonis is questionable. He played last game and put up over 50 when he was questionable as well. So take that one with a bit of grain of salt. Spurs at the Grizzlies, a nice little pace-up spot here. Or not pace-up, but a nice game flow. Memphis, a 1.5-point home favorite, so we got a really nice spread on this game. And the total at 231 231. So we got a really nice total. San Antonio 14th in terms of pace over their last 10. Memphis, numero 2. So they're coming in as the second fastest team over their last 10. Really fast pace. Really like this game, obviously. Magic at the Suns. Phoenix minus 2.5. 217.5 on the total. We know that Orlando was not running with a lot of pace. However, over their last 10, they are 15th in terms of pace. So that's pretty interesting. We know Phoenix runs pretty fast. They're 10th. Aaron Gordon is questionable with a sore calf, so be on the lookout for that. The Charlotte Hornets going into Utah to take on the Jazz. 12.5-point home favorite here for Utah. 212.5 on the total. Charlotte 30th in terms of pace. Utah 26th over their last 10. Can probably cross this game out. I just don't think there's just a whole lot that we're going to love about it. Maybe a couple one-offs like Rudy Gobert is in a great spot at home here. Charlotte struggles against the center spot. Don't believe I'll be paying up for Donovan Mitchell. Terry Rozier is a contrarian look on the other side who's been playing really well. But nonetheless, I probably won't be playing too awful much out of that game. The game that everybody wants, of course, is the Lakers and the Mavericks. Anthony Davis is still questionable. We don't have a total. Dallas minus 1.5 here at home. Only a little small 1-point favorite. So that's really interesting. Obviously, the LeBron James and Luka Doncic show is happily going to commence. The last time these two met, they both just straight went at each other. It was really good. LA Lakers 16th in terms of pace over their last 10. Dallas 22nd. Last two on the board, we have the Bucks going into Sacramento to take on the Kings. Milwaukee minus 8 on the road. No total. Giannis is questionable, but I think he's probable. So I'm not really sure why we don't have a total on this one. However, Milwaukee 3rd over their last 10 in terms of pace. Sacramento is 11th. another one that was really kind of eye-opening. The Kings have been playing pretty decent, and obviously they are missing some pieces on their interior. Looks like Rashawn Holmes has already been ruled out. They're still, missing Marvin Bagley. He's questionable, I believe, going into tonight. So that'll be interesting to note. Obviously, we will need to know that kind of news. That is a game that we will be looking to play some pieces in. And then your nightcap, you have the Warriors going into Clippers, going into Clipperland, going over into the Staples Center to take on the Clippers. Clippers minus 13.5 here at home, no total. Golden State, not over their last 10. LA Clippers, 4th in terms of pace over their last 10. We already have Paul George ruled out. And then D'Angelo Russell is questionable. He practiced yesterday. I assume that he would play. We'll go ahead and wait and see on that one. All right, so let's hop right into the positionals. We'll start, of course, at the point guard spot. Luka Doncic, 12-6, 59.3 last game he played the Lakers. Over 61 in his last 4 of 5. The Lakers are allowing the 10th most of that point guard spot over their last 10. 36.9% usage rate over his last 5. Kristaps Porzingis is out once again already. Yeah, lock and load Luka. LeBron James on the flip side at 11K. He only put up 45.5 in this game in their last meeting. If AD happens to sit, obviously we're going to have to lock and load LeBron James as well. Over 51 fantasy points in his last 4. He's had 2 days of rest, which is really good. So definitely expect a nice little rested, healthy LBJ here. This should be a really good game. If you can find a way to stack both of those guys, I would highly recommend it. Trae Young at 10-4. His price is finally where it needs to be. Washington allowing 4th most of that point guard spot over on the season, so they've been giving it up. We know that. It's a great spot. It's a very fast-paced game. 80.3 fantasy points in his last game against Houston. He's put up 50 or more in his last 9 of 10. 35.1% usage rate in his last 10 games as well, which is just absolutely insane. Trae Young, of course, is in a massively good spot again. De'Aaron Fox at 7.5. Not really sure what the price is here at 7.5. I think I'll take it in this pace up spot here. It should be a nice little pace game. He's went for 38 or more in his last 3 of 4. 28.1% usage rate in his last 5. I like De'Aaron Fox at the price. Spencer Dinwiddie, I'm going right back to that well, and I hope that everybody doesn't. 19 plus field goal attempts in his last 2. He's got a 33.6% usage rate in his last 5. And he's still gone for 38 or more in his last 5 of 6 at home. Tonight he gets the Miami Heat at home. I'm totally a fan of Dinwiddie once again at 7.4. Everybody is kind of worried that, Karis LeVert's going to come back and steal some of his usage. That's not really been the case. I'm totally fine with him still at 7.4. I think the price is totally fine. Lonzo Ball at 7.3. Of course, no Drew Holiday still. 38 or more in his last 4 of 5, 21.6% usage rate, and he's put up over 20 real points in his last 4 of 5, which is pretty encouraging. Means he's actually trying to shoot more. He's taking more threes, which is really good. They're going to need that. So Lonzo obviously is there. Ja Morant at 7.2. Got a nice little high total here at home against San Antonio. Good matchup. Over 40 in his last 2 of 3. Over 30 minutes in his last 3 of 4. So that's encouraging. We know that Morant's minutes have fluctuated a little bit. Seeing him getting over 30 minutes is really, really good stuff. So John Morant at 7.2. Terry Rozier, as I mentioned earlier, at 6.9. Over 39 fantasy points in his last 4. He's put up 39, 42, 40, 45 minutes in his last 4. 24.5% usage rate over his last 5. He's taken 15, 22, 17, and 24 field goal attempts in his last 4 as well. We're getting a pretty aggressive here. Terry Rozier, I like it a lot. It's not the greatest of spots. It's a really low total. They're a big, huge dog. But if you feel like taking the gamble in some tournaments, I probably will. So me and you will be together on that one. Elfrid Payton at 6.3, 29 or more in his last 2 of 3, 25 plus minutes in his last 7 of 8. Gets a nice little pace up spot here with the Pelicans. I'm totally fine with some Elfrid. Ish Smith at 5.7 gets a nice pace game with Atlanta here as well. 28 or more in his last 3 or 4. 24.7% usage rate over his last 5. Of course, he's been out playing IT pretty much all season. He does really well off the bench, so they keep it that way. Totally fine with Ish Smith. Shooting guard spot, I'm going to be looking to jam in a lot of Booker if possible, 8.4. Orlando is allowing the 10th most of that shooting guard spot over their last 10. He's carrying a 33.2% usage rate over his last 5. Over 45 fantasy points in his last 7 straight. Over 50 in his last 5 of 6. So get your Devin Booker in. Zach LaVine at 8.3. Indiana is actually allowing the second most fantasy points to that shooting guard spot over their last 10. 45 or more in his last 3, over 51 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3, carrying a shade under a 31% usage rate at 30.7 over his last 5. Zach LaVine's been balling as well. Jimmy Butler at 8K, if you want to go there. Brooklyn, 9th most of that shooting guard spot over their last 10. 34 or more minutes in his last 4 of 5. Over 40 fantasy points in his last 4 of 6. You need 40 to hit value with Butler. So, I mean, it is something that he's done in 4 of his last 6. So, if you want to go there, I'm totally fine. One of the prices that I really like in the shooting guard is going to be Buddy Hield once again at 6.6. Milwaukee is actually allowing the 5th most of that shooting guard spot over their last 10. 34 or more in his last 6 of 7. Over 40 in his last 3 of 6. And he's carrying a 26.2% usage rate right behind De'Aaron Fox. So, good stuff there on Buddy Hield. Really like that spot again for him at home. If Bradley Beal does happen to sit once again, we're going to obviously have to look at Jordan McRae again at 6.5. Atlanta allowing the number 1 most fantasy points to that shooting guard spot over their last 10. Of course, if Bill sits, he's carrying a 30.4% usage rate over his last 5, 29 or more minutes in his last 6 of 7. He's already got a role in the rotation, but of course, his usage rate is just massive without Brad Beal. So if that is the case, he will likely be chalk once again, but I think it'll be good chalk tonight. It's a great spot, great matchup, and yeah, great pace. Kevin Huerter at 6.1. Washington defense, of course, on the flip side. 38 or more fantasy points in his last 4 or 5. He's played 30 or more minutes in his last 6 straight. He's a good look at 6.1. J.J. Redick 5.6. With Drew out, he has played 20. Let's see. He's played really well lately. Sorry, I thought I had his minutes down here, but I don't. He put up 39.5 last game in about 29 minutes. 25 or more in his last 4. 28 or more in his last 3. So J.J. Redick at 5.6 has been stepping in really well. Joe Ingles at 5.6. If you want to go there, I'm totally fine with it. 26 or more minutes in his last 12. Over 24 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4 at home. Over 40 in 2 of those 4 at home. It's not the best of spots, obviously. Dylan Brooks at 5.3, I think, is in a good spot. 34, 29, and 33 in his last 3. Get a nice pace spot here with San Antonio at home. 28 or more minutes in his last 4. A spot that he can probably look to exploit. He is a big part of that Memphis team. He will take plenty of shots. So Dylan Brooks, I'm totally fine with at 5.3. RJ Barrett gets a really big bump without Julius Randle. He is returning home. They've been playing on the road for the last 4 or 5 games. He typically plays better at home. Nobody's going to play RJ Barrett tonight. I think he's in a good spot here against the Pelicans without Drew Holiday. I don't have the exact number, but he gets like a 5% usage bump without Julius Randle on the floor. So RJ Barrett at 5.2 I think is a really good building block as well tonight. Tyler Hero below the 4K range. I think he's like 4.7. 22 or more in his last 3 or 4. 25 plus minutes in his last 4 as well. He's been playing pretty well lately again. Hopping over to the small forward, Giannis at 11.1. We know Sacramento is struggling against bigs right now. They don't really have any. They're starting Dwayne Dedmon at the center spot. 54 or more in his last 3 or 4, over 31 minutes in his last 3 or 4. Obviously, Giannis doesn't need 30 minutes to put up 60 or plus. So, it's up to you. Milwaukee is not really a huge favorite. They're only -8 here. And we talked about the pace for these two teams, so it should be a faster paced game. Really like this, and I think Giannis is maybe one of those studs you want to try to get in as well. Kawhi at 9.9 if you're feeling that. If you think the Warriors can hang around, I would say play Kawhi, obviously with no PG. Golden State's allowing the 4th most of that small forward spot over their last 10. He's put up 39 or more in his last 3, so he's a good play, obviously. He's priced up really high. Or you can just go ahead and play Brandon Ingram at 9.2. New York is allowing the 3rd most of the small forward spot over their last 10. He put up 62 and 57 in his last 2. Of course, he is questionable, so make sure he plays. DeMar DeRozan, of course, finally getting a little bit of respect, but he's still only 7.2. He put up 51.3 in this same matchup against Memphis in their last time out, or their last meeting. He's put up 37 or more in his last 6 straight. DDR continues to be a model of consistency and a really good one at that. Chris Middleton at 7K. He's put up over 30 minutes in his last 6. He put up 41.8 last game against Golden State. Playing really well. Kelly Oubre is a spot that I really like. At 7K at home here. Orlando 6 most of that small forward spot over the last 10. John Isaac out has done a number to their defense right there. And Kelly Oubre should have his way. Of course, if Aaron Gordon sits as well, this is just going to make this play even better. 36 or more in his last 5 of 6, over 40 in his last 4 of 6. So Kelly Oubre has been playing really well, and it's a really good spot here at home. Troy Brown Jr., if you want to go there at 6.6 in this game stack, I'm totally fine with it. 44 fantasy points last game. If Bill sits, of course, he gets a good spot here against Atlanta. Against that small forward spot, we know they struggle. 27 or more fantasy points in his last 3. So it's priced up a little bit because he just had a massive 44-point game, but it is a great spot. You can't really deny that. Davis Bertans at 5.9 is back. It's kind of weird. We want to see how rotation is going to work for the Wizards now that he's back. Is he on a minutes limit? Obviously, it's a great matchup here with Atlanta, as we know. We'll just have to kind of see what kind of reports come out on him as far as minute-wise goes. TJ Warren at 5.7. I know he got ejected after 22 minutes last game. He only put up 9 fantasy points. Jimmy Butler ate his lunch. Chicago, I doubt that will happen. I mean, they may put Chris Dunn on him, but nonetheless, I think he has a little bit of a size advantage over Chris Dunn. Chicago is allowing the number 1 most fantasy points to that small forward spot over their last 10. He's put up over 30 fantasy points in his last 4. He put up 50.3 the game before he got ejected against Charlotte. So TJ Warren, of course, is a decent spot as well. If Malcolm Brogdon happens to return, might knock him down just a little bit, but I'm still fine with him at 5.7. Jay Crowder at 5.5. He's put up 39, 39, 13, 22, and 41 in his last 5 at home. Obviously, you see the floor down there at 13, but you also see the ceiling where he gets up to 40 or so fantasy points. He's got nice upside. He's playing at home where he usually plays pretty well. 31 or more minutes in his last 3 or 4. He's put up over 34 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4 as well. Josh Hart at 5.1. New York, of course, allowing third most of that small forward spot. 28 or more in his last 2 of 3. 27 plus minutes in his last 3. Josh Hart continues to get good run without Drew Holiday. Joe Harris, if you want to go a contrarian, look at 5.0K versus Miami at home. Yeah, at home. 29 or more fantasy points in his last 2 of 3. Over 31 minutes in his last 8 games. Joe Harris is playing lots of minutes. His price, I wish, was more like 4.6 or lower, but at 5K, I still think there's a little bit of value. Trevor Ariza at 4.7 has had to play lots of minutes lately. He's played over 31 minutes in his last 3. He's put up 31.8 and 36.2 fantasy points in his last 2. We know that they're missing some players, so if Bagley sits again, Ariza will obviously get more run. Let's move over. Let's see. A couple more here on the small forward list. Mo Harkless at 4.4 likely could get the start with Kawhi Leonard playing the 4. If he does, he could get some nice little extended run if you want to go there. Justin Holiday at 4.1 gets a nice little revenge spot here against Chicago, who he played for a little bit. Excuse me. As we know, Chicago, number 1 to that small forward spot, as mentioned earlier with the TJ Warren. Over 25 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3, 22 or more minutes in his last 6 of 7. So he's getting good run. He's playing decent minutes. And we have seen a little bit of upside with Justin Holiday. Maybe he has a little bit of added, fuel for this fire against Chicago. So if you want to go there at 4.1, I think I'm fine. Moving over to the power forward spot, Anthony Davis at 10.1. If he does happen to play, gets a Dallas team without Kristaps Porzingis. They're running a little bit small with Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell. The 2 games prior to the game he got injured in hurt his tailbone. He put up 65 and 73. So if AD happens to play, definitely going to have to look that way. Domantas Sabonis at 9.1 versus Chicago, who's allowing the 6th most of that power forward spot over their last 10. Over 50 fantasy points in his last 2. Over 47 in his last 5 straight. Sabonis has been playing really well. Nice, really nice cash play. John Collins at 8.5. Washington allowed 7th most of that power forward spot over their last 10. 29 or more in his last 3 or 4. 33 and 46 in his last 2. Should be a really good spot here. We know Washington struggles. LaMarcus Aldridge at 7.4. Actually, Memphis is allowing the number 1 most fantasy points to the power forward spot over their last 10. So that's really encouraging. Over 35 in his last 4 of 6. So I really like LaMarcus Aldridge. Once again, on the flip side, Jaren Jackson, he's put up over 38 fantasy points in his last 3, over 30 in his last 6, and he's played over 31 minutes in his last 4. So Jaren Jackson at home at 7.1 I think is totally fine. On the flip side, especially if you're game stacking that game, which I probably likely will be. Bobby Portis at 6.4, played 29 minutes, put up 41 fantasy points in his last game without no Julius Randle. Of course, he gets a nice little pace-up spot here against New Orleans. The price is way up there, but I mean, we see the upside. We know the upside. BP plays really hard. He goes all out every minute that he's on the floor. So yeah, if he's going to get 29, 30 minutes at 6.4, I think I'm totally fine with it in this pace-up spot against the Pelicans. They really don't have anybody else. So Bojan Bogdanovic at 6.3. Charlotte allowing the third most of that power forward spot over their last 10. He's put up 33 and 35 in his last two. Over 30 minutes in his last 6 to 7, so Bojan gets buckets. Belicia at 6K. Milwaukee is allowing the fourth most of that power forward spot over their last 10. Again, they're having problems. They don't have a lot of bodies. They're down a couple guys. If Marvin Bagley sits again, I really like Belicia at 6K in this fast-paced matchup at home. 38 minutes, 36 fantasy points in his last game. Yeah, Belicia will be in play. Thad Young at 5.7 has gotten good run. 27 or more minutes in his last three. He's put up 21, 33, and 35 in his last three. Of course, Wendell Carter Jr. is out, and Indiana is allowing the eighth most of that power forward spot over their last 10. So Thad Young is in a good spot as well. Obviously, if no AD, we're going to have to look at, excuse me. If no AD, we're going to have to look at Kyle Kuzma at 5.3. 21 minutes in his last game, 25 fantasy points with AD. He, probably played a lot of the extra run when Anthony Davis went out. So that's obviously something we're going to have to look at. And we may even want to play Kuz just because, if Anthony Davis is any kind of limited at all, Kyle Kuzma is going to be a good play at 5.3. JaMychal Green at 5K with no PG. Like I said, it could be the fact that Kawhi stays at the 3 and JaMychal starts at the 4. He played 32 minutes last game, put up 30 fantasy points. So that's interesting. We'll be waiting to kind of see who they're going to start. Omari Spellman for the Golden State Warriors at 4.1. He's put up 18, 22, and 20 minutes. Sorry, not put up. He's played 18, 22, and 20 minutes in his last three. Put up 22, 27, and 43 fantasy points in those three as well. So if you want to look there, I'm totally fine. They've struggled, down low as well. So Spellman could be a nice thing off the bench, scoring-wise especially. He hits three-pointers as well. Kim Birch at 4.1. Started at the power forward spot for the Magic last game. He played 29 minutes, put up 33 fantasy points. And he gets Phoenix this time in a nice base-up spot. So, yeah, if he happens to start again at the 4, at 4.1, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. Moving over to the center spot where we get this thing wrapped up. Nikola Vucevic at 8.8, over 47 in his last 4, over 40 in his last 8 straight. Vucevic has been playing really well with the injury to John Isaac. Of course, they continue to run the offense through him, so he's going to continue to be a focal point. Vucevic is totally fine. Again, I mentioned I like the one-off with Rudy Gobert. I think I will have a little bit of him. Played 26 minutes last game against the Knicks and put up 47 fantasy points. He's put up 40 fantasy points or more in his last 7 games at home. He gets the Charlotte Hornets here at home, who's allowing the fifth most of that center spot over the last 10. I really like Rudy. Really don't love the price, but I'm totally fine. I still think he can get 50 in 26 to 28 minutes. Bam Adebayo at 8.1. We know Brooklyn struggles against bigs. He's put up 37 or more in his last 4 of 5. He's played over 35 minutes in his last 8 of 9. So Bam is in play. DeAndre Ayton at 7.8 if you want to go a little bit lower on the flip side of that Vucevic. 32 or more minutes in his last 4. He's put up over 36 fantasy points in his last 4. 3 of those 4 have gone for over 40. So DeAndre Ayton at home I think is a really good look as well. Montrezl Harrell at 6.7 without PG. Could see really nice, good usage on that second unit. Golden State versus centers we know is a thing. He's dominated this matchup in the earlier games this season. He's went for over 33 fantasy points in his last 3 straight. And in his last 2, 42.8 and 44.5. So Montrezl Harrell is definitely a good look at 6.7. Miles Turner at 6.1 if you want to kind of look there. Chicago against centers. It's more Lauri Markkanen playing the 5. 27 or more in his last 3 or 4, 29 or more minutes in his last 4. So good stuff there for Turner if you want to go there. I'm totally fine in tournaments. Alex Len at 5.2 is another tournament play. 23 minutes last game, 29.5 fantasy points. Gets the number 1 overall allowing fantasy point total to the center spot in Washington. So if you want to go there, I'm totally fine with Alex Len. On the flip side, Pasnix for Washington, he is 4.6. He played 35 minutes last game, put up 29.6 fantasy points. We know how many fantasy points that Len has been giving up lately to the center spot as well. This is going to be a great spot for both. And then finally, last but not least, Dwayne Dedmon. Milwaukee, allowing 6 most of that center spot over their last 10. Put up a 12.10 rebound double-double on his last game after he was activated right before the game started. 32 minutes, 26.5 fantasy points. They're going to have to play him again. Obviously, Rashawn Holmes has already been ruled out. The only reason that I could not see him starting is if Marvin Bagley plays, and who knows what he's going to play. Who knows if he'll be limited or whatnot. So Dwayne Dedmon, I think, will obviously have some nice value at below 4.5K. All right, that's going to do it. That's going to wrap up your Friday edition of the Quick Breaks NBA DFS podcast. Hope you guys enjoy your Friday. Kick off your weekend. Let's win some money.